The Romans trapped and surrounded by the Gauls. Officers dead, and Caesar still does not know of this very bad situation. Will Cicero manage to let Caesar know? Subscribe to the channel and watch the video to know more. So, they immediately sent messengers to the Centurions, Grudi, Levaci, Plumaxi, and Didamni, who were all under their rule, and gathered as many men as they could. They suddenly swooped down on Cicero's winter quarters before news of Titurius' death had reached him. As expected, a number of soldiers who had gone into the woods to gather wood and construct fortifications were intercepted by the sudden arrival of the cavalry. With these men surrounded, the Eburones, Nervi, Aduatuci, and all their allies and dependents began to attack the legion. Our men quickly grabbed their arms and climbed the rampart. The day was barely held out, as the enemy placed all their hope in speed and believed that victory, once gained, would secure them as perpetual victors. Cicero immediately sent letters to Caesar, offering great rewards to those who would carry them. But all the roads were blocked, and the messengers were intercepted. At night, from the materials they had gathered for the fortifications, they quickly built about 120 towers with incredible speed. They completed whatever seemed necessary for defense. The next day, the enemy attacked the camp with even larger forces, filled the ditch, and resisted the same way as the previous day. This same situation continued for several days. No part of the night was spared for rest or work, and no opportunity was given to the sick or wounded for rest. Whatever was needed for the next day's attack was prepared at night. Many stakes were charred, a large number of wall javelins were made, towers were built, and battlements and parapets were woven from wicker. Though Cicero was very weak in health, he did not even leave himself the night for rest, and the soldiers' constant efforts and pleas forced him to spare himself. Then the leaders and chiefs of the Nervi, who had some way to speak with Cicero and had some grounds for friendship, asked for a conversation. Granted permission, they repeated the same points Ambiorix had made to Titurius. All of Gaul was in arms. The Germans had crossed the Rhine. The winter quarters of Caesar and the other legates were being attacked. They added news of Sabinus's death and displayed Ambiorix to lend credibility. They said it was a mistake for the Romans to hope for help from those who had no confidence in their own situation. Nevertheless, they were of such a mindset towards Cicero and the Roman people that they refused nothing but the winter quarters and did not wish for this habit to continue. They offered the Romans safe passage from the winter quarters to go wherever they wished without fear. Cicero replied to this that it was not the custom of the Roman people to accept terms from an armed enemy. If they were willing to disarm, they could use him as a mediator and send envoys to Caesar, hoping to achieve their requests through his justice. Rejected from this hope, the Nervi began to surround the winter quarters with a 9-foot rampart and a 15-foot trench. They had learned these techniques from us during previous years and were taught by the captives they secretly held from our army. Despite lacking appropriate tools, they attempted to cut turf with their swords and dig the earth with their hands and cloaks. This effort revealed their massive number. They completed a fortification 15 miles in circumference in less than 3 hours and spent the following days constructing towers, siege hooks, and mantlets, as instructed by the same captives. On the 7th day of the siege, with a strong wind arising, they began to hurl burning clay balls and heated javelins onto the huts covered with straw in the Gallic fashion. The huts quickly caught fire, and the wind spread the flames throughout the camp. The enemy, with a great shout as if they had already won, began to drive forward their towers and mantlets and to climb the rampart with ladders. But the valor and presence of mind of the soldiers were such that, although they were being burned from all sides and overwhelmed by a great number of javelins, and saw all their possessions and all their fortunes in flames, not one of them abandoned his post on the rampart. They fought with the greatest intensity and bravery. This day was the most severe for our men, but it had the outcome that a large number of the enemy were wounded and killed as they had crowded under the very rampart, and the last ranks did not allow the first to retreat. The flames abated slightly, and in one spot a tower was brought up and touched the rampart. The centurions of the 3rd cohort withdrew from the spot where they were standing and called the enemy to enter if they wished, but none dared to advance. Then, showered with stones from all sides, they were driven back, and the tower was set on fire. In that legion were 2 very brave men, centurions approaching the first ranks, Titus Pullo and Lucius Vorenus. These men had ongoing disputes about who was to be preferred, and they competed fiercely every year for promotion. Of these, Pullo, when the fighting at the fortifications was most intense, said, "Why do you hesitate, Vorenus? Or what better opportunity do you seek for proving your valor? This day will judge our disputes." After saying this, he advanced outside the fortifications and charged into the part of the enemy that seemed most crowded. Not even Vorenus then stayed within the rampart, but fearing what everyone would think, followed. Pullo threw his javelin into the enemy and struck one who was running forward from the multitude. When he was hit and knocked unconscious, the enemies protected him with their shields, and all threw their spears at Pullo, giving him no chance to retreat. Pullo's shield was pierced, and a javelin stuck in his belt. This turned aside his scabbard and hindered his right hand as he tried to draw his sword, and he was surrounded by the enemy. His rival Vorenus ran to his aid and helped him in his distress. The whole multitude turned from Pullo to Vorenus, thinking Pullo was killed by the javelin. Vorenus fought at close quarters with his sword and drove back the enemy a little, killing one. While he pressed on more eagerly, he fell into a lower position. Pullo ran to help him again, and both returned to the fortifications, safe after killing several enemies with great glory. Thus fortune handled both in their rivalry, so that each became the other's helper and savior, and it could not be decided which of the two seemed superior in valor. As the siege grew graver and more intense each day, and especially as many soldiers were worn out by their wounds, reducing the number of defenders, messages and messengers to Caesar were sent more frequently. Some of these were captured and tortured to death in front of our soldiers. Inside was a Nervian named Vertico, born of a noble family, who had fled to Cicero at the start of the siege and proved his loyalty. He persuaded his slave with promises of freedom and great rewards to deliver a letter to Caesar. This man, carrying the letter tied to a javelin, mingled with the Gauls without any suspicion and reached Caesar. From him, Caesar learned of Cicero's and the legion's danger. Upon receiving the letter around the 11th hour, Caesar immediately sent a messenger to the quaestor Marcus Crassus in the Bellovici, whose winter quarters were 25 miles away. He ordered him to set out with his legion at midnight and come to him quickly. Crassus left with the messenger. Caesar also sent another to Gaius Fabius, instructing him to lead his legion into the territory of the Atrebates, where he knew he had to pass. He wrote to Labienus, asking him to come with his legion to the territory of the Nervi if it could be done for the public good. He did not think it wise to wait for the rest of the army, which was farther away, and gathered about 400 cavalry from the nearest winter quarters. Now Caesar knows about Ambiorix's rebellion. I'm not so sure he will be clement with Ambiorix. To know the end, you need to subscribe to the channel and wait for the next video.